McLeod and Britt helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, water from the recent street flooding has long subsided, but the tension continues to rise, including complaints from Jefferson Parish and a planned demonstration. We'll check on the latest from the troubled Sewage and Water Board. We'll also hear what a reporter learned after spending a day with the governor for a magazine profile. And in politics, we'll look at the city's 2 council-at-large races. Our Future Watch segment examines a program called Resilient New Orleans and its vision for water retention. Well, sharing their vision with us are tonight's Informed Sources: Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources; Tyler Bridges, reporter, The New Orleans Advocate; Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter; and Kurt Sprang, anchor and reporter, WGNO-TV, Channel 26. And we go over to Tyler first, and let's just do a quick update about what's going on with the mayor's race. We still do have a mayor's race. I mean, all we've been talking about is flooding for the past couple of weeks, but let's catch up with the mayor's race right now.
Yeah, the primary is 2 months away, but I don't think anybody can really say that the race is joined yet, that the candidates are really engaged, and it probably won't happen until they really start advertising on TV, particularly contrasting themselves with the others. But at this point, the race seems pretty wide open. I saw a poll this week that showed undecided with about a quarter of the vote, which is just about the same percentage of the vote as Desiree Charbonnet and Latoya Cantrell, and Michael Bagneris just a little behind them, and then below them is Troy Henry. So it seems to be about a 4-person race potentially, or at least Troy Henry trying to make it into the top. Crime is clearly has been the most important issue, but with the recent flooding, that could emerge in the public survey that we'll see next. And the candidates have been spending their time really not doing a lot of public events, really they go into a lot of different neighborhood groups or interest groups that are issuing endorsements, and they've also been spending a lot of time raising money.
Right, and you did a piece about, it was Michael Bagneris, who seems to have this support of a pretty prominent business person in town who's also trying to get other people to support him and therefore donate money.
Yeah, I wrote a story for The Advocate, a man named Frank Stewart. I learned that he had a breakfast with Michael Bagneris. Frank Stewart is a very wealthy white businessman, and he invited 50 of his friends to his office in Heritage Plaza over in Metairie. And he told me that 38 of them showed up at an event where Michael Bagneris presented himself and pitched himself to these people. And according to Frank Stewart, who's already had given Michael Bagneris some money, a lot of money, that the 38 people there were very impressed with Michael Bagneris. And Michael Bagneris as well told me that everybody that he has called since that meeting has written him a contribution. Then I also noted in the article that another prominent businessman, Jay LaPere, also hosted a meet and greet at his home uptown for Bagneris, and afterwards LaPere told me that he wrote a $5,000 check for Bagneris, and Bagneris has been trailing in the polls and certainly trailing in the money raising. And now this is not something that maybe the public likes to hear, talking about money raising, but this is the system that we have, and this is how people get their word out, is by raising money. And Bagneris has a lot less money, particularly compared to Desiree Charbonnet.
Well, he must have gotten some, because he's been running commercials this week. It's been the first mayoral commercials I've seen responding to the flooding, so he's been talking about that.
Yeah, he started a 15-second ad where he says, I'll solve the problem. And indeed, Errol, he has been able to air that ad with the money recently that he's gotten from these business leaders.
Well, Desiree Charbonnet definitely had taken the big lead in terms of campaign funds available.
Oh yeah, she has a lot more money. She has faced some criticism because a lot of city contractors are in there, and we hear stories that we haven't been able to completely verify of people being told, look, she's going to be the next mayor. You want to be aboard in terms of giving money, but this development with Frank Stewart and Jay LaPera and other business leaders giving money to Michael Bagneris is important because he really does need money. We should note that Frank Stewart has been running full-page ads in my newspaper and other newspapers saying that what Mayor Landrieu did on the monuments is a terrible thing. So Michael Bagneris has now gotten very close with a businessman who's very identified with criticism of removing the four Jim Crow era monuments.
Okay, so mayor's race just really starting to really heat up, but it'll probably really be in full force after Labor Day.
Exactly.
Where it goes in. Okay, thanks a lot, Tyler. I'm going to go over to Kurt right now. And as I mentioned, talk has been flooding, sewage and water board, pumps not working,
Flooding.
turbines not working.
We had some flooding.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a major issue in everybody's mind. So does anybody know where we stand right now?
The mayor is going to have a group, a third party, come in and take a look and find out exactly where we stand on all the pumps. The mayor said within the past 2 weeks that New Orleans comes together during tough times. And in fact, people will come together tomorrow outside City Hall in a protest calling for the mayor to resign. He's not going to.
Resign as mayor.
Yes, and other people have asked him to step down from his position with the Sewage and Water Board.
But
as
to
well.
resign as mayor, not immediately, but in the beginning of next year after the election. Is that correct?
Well,
that's what I've read.
Which person are you talking to?
Yeah,
we've got so many people involved here, so many groups involved
But
here.
that wouldn't put the next person in, even if he did resign.
It is just obviously an effort to get his attention.
Let me just qualify that. If the mayor would resign, which he isn't, that the next mayor would be one of the two council members at large, elected from the council.
Until May of next year.
Yeah, it wouldn't have anything to do with the upcoming election.
Right. But so this has been a very eventful 2 weeks. I mean, we got more than 9 inches of rain in some areas of the city. The mayor makes it very clear that while there was a great deal of misinformation and wrong information about the status of the pumps and how they performed 2 Saturdays ago, that also, even if they were operating at what we all thought would be 100% at capacity, that the city still would have flooded, that there was just too much water coming in. But since then, I mean, we've had, retirements and calls for resignation and calls for firing. We've had we had leaks of diesel and generator fire.
An unhappy Jefferson Parish.
And Jefferson Parish President Yenny says that he was not informed when we had the generator fire, which directly affected one pumping station that the two parishes share on the 17th Street Canal, that in fact he was not contacted, as he should have been, to be made aware that was going to be a problem. And so he is now authorized Entergy to come in and run a line from Jefferson Parish into that pumping station, so that should there be a power issue, that he, from the Jefferson Parish side, can have Entergy, flip on the switch and get the pump going again. But it's going to be a long way out of this. I think it's interesting when we hear about Bagneris' ad saying, "I can solve the problem." It's not this is not a very quick fix. This is not a quick solve problem.
It's a long time in the making. And so pumps are being repaired as we speak, but the system isn't anywhere near capacity in terms of 120 pumps operating. There's just not anywhere near. Turbines also being repaired.
Turbines, I think we've all gotten quite an education over the past 2 weeks on exactly what we have, how it's connected, how it works, how they rely on each other. We have 3 major turbines. We were down to one. Who knew? Who knew we were down to one turbine?
And go back to Mayor Landrieu for a moment. I thought my colleague Stephanie Grace at The Advocate had a really terrific column saying that Mayor Landrieu really was kind of trying to focus on a lot of things outside of New Orleans. He's now the president for the next year of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. He seems to have some national ambitions. He was in Aspen when the most recent flooding, and then the press conference the next day, he had not made it back. But then since then, he's been very aggressive, holding a press availability or press conference almost every single day, really trying to assert leadership on this issue.
That's true. I mean, there's constantly press notices coming out daily, once or twice a day, about the update. Council just appropriated some extra money for catch basin cleanup. That's another big issue there.
That's another big issue. The mayor's making it clear
there's been emergency contracts let out too for repair to bring in emergency contractors. And another big issue is staffing. We find out that they're really understaffed and they've had a hard time filling positions.
I mean, it's been quite a box that we've opened up here. But yeah, we've got the 26 emergency generators that are, as I understand, all hooked up at this point and ready to help. The mayor wants people to take some responsibility for the catch basins in their neighborhood. You know, how many times have you seen somebody who cut grass with a blower just blowing the grass
One
into
of my neighbors today had
the
his
street?
own contractors on his own dime repairing two catch basins in
Cleaning
my
those
neighborhood
out.
because
Yeah, well,
the city
15,000 was
hasn't
money
gotten to
enough to clean out 15,000 of the 65,000.
You know, there's been some footage showing that sewage and water board meeting when the turbine issue was first mentioned. And if you saw it, it was mentioned sort of casually, almost, by the way, we've got a problem, kind of like with a laugh. Nobody really took it seriously. And to me, that moment right there was a question of inflection. If the person would have said, hey, look, we've got a big problem, let me tell you about this, I think it was alerted everybody. And then the mayor's pointed out, the media didn't even point this out either, but and probably would have alerted everybody. And so if they had just stated what the problem was as being a serious problem, could have had a huge difference on everything else that would follow.
Well, it's certainly a major issue now, and crime is certainly still a major issue, but so is this drainage situation because it's a matter of survival.
I think they have an
for us,
outreach center, a recovery center open
Right.
tomorrow as well.
It's major. So we're going to now transition over to Dawn to talk about resiliency, because that certainly is like the buzzword, resiliency. It's really important to continue to survive, but drainage is certainly a big part of that.
Well, it's very funny because we hear all this talk about turbines and pump stations and capacity and catch basins, but we've heard nothing about the Greater New Orleans Urban Water Project or Urban Water Plan or Resilient New Orleans. New Orleans, one of 100 cities, who actually has grant money in place and is working on projects to live with water. If we all remember back to post-Katrina, we talked about the Dutch models and experts from the Netherlands came in and taught us what to do. And bottom line, experts say we would need 200 and something more pumps at the cost of hundreds of millions of dollars to be able to pump our way out of a major rain event. We can't do it. What they say is we need to learn to live with water around us, and that not only helps us in flooding time, it also helps with oh my goodness, the word's escaping me right now. The soil subsidence. Our roads collapse and we get the potholes we get because we don't let any water sit on them for long enough to fill up the soil again. It gets too dry and then things collapse. We pump it out the minute it starts dropping. So there are projects on the books, and there's a FEMA grant. There's also a Rockefeller Center grant. There's also a HUD grant for some of these projects, most of which are focused in the Gentilly area between Bayou St. John and the London Avenue Canal. The biggest of which is called the Mirabeau Water Garden. This is 90% complete on the design phase. It should be actually complete in 2019. It's a 25-acre swath of land where they really will hold rainwater. They'll move it from the London Avenue Canal or let it sit there for a while. You can look at different pictures online. Here it is when it's a major rain event. Here it is days later. Here it is when it's dry. And it's basically public gardens. It's what Jefferson Parish does to a higher level. The water garden is a higher level than what Jefferson Parish is doing, for instance, at Pontiff Playground in Old Metairie, where they flood the playground in the event of a major rain, let the water sit there for a while, and then slowly pump it out so that you're not overwhelming pumps. You're letting the water table rise in certain areas. So the water garden is one of 15 different projects that is actually on the books and is starting to happen in Orleans Parish. Most of them will be complete by 2022, and most of them are fully funded, but nobody's talking about it.
Is one of the things possibly having asphalt that where the water can actually seep
through.
Jefferson Parish
Yes.
unveiled the new sidewalks just this week. That it
Yes,
has.
and Errol said to me before the show, what about on Canal Boulevard where there are drainage ditches? There are ways to do all this that actually beautify our community too, with plants and greenery, and those plants and trees that are all part of it actually absorb more water
Well, the Canal
too.
Boulevard, part of the median is actually a sunken garden, and I can tell you there are ducks in there.
Right.
That the ducks have already
And
found their way to
there
it.
might be fish too. You know, we're in a very different time in New Orleans. We have about the same population we had in 1940, but we're living on 2 times as much land as we lived on back in 1940. So we filled in all these swamps. We've got to figure out a way to let the water come back a little bit more naturally. And the city is working on it and is part of this, as you said, 100 Resilient Cities. It's out there. So, you know, and when you get distressed, like, we'll never pump our way out of this problem. No, we never will pump our way out of this problem, but it does look like there are good minds working together on other solutions that will make a difference in the future. Not this year and not next year,
And
unfortunately.
with this urban water plan, where basically the whole philosophy is we need to learn
Live
to
with
live
water.
with the water.
Live with-
Like the
and
Dutch
control
do.
it.
Like the Dutch do. And, you know, like New Orleans used to do. We used to have all the bayous cut through into the city. And if we did, you have more places for paddle boarding and for kayaking and that sort of, and urban living in the water. And so there are
and more places for the ducks.
more places for the ducks and the snakes and that sort of thing. But
Okay, yeah, we hear about the 6-foot rattlesnake. We
yes,
don't wanna
that's
hear
what I
about
was
that.
thinking about.
Okay, Dawn, thanks a lot. Well, we'll be hearing more about that urban water
Yes.
plan, I'm sure, in the months and years to come. Okay, Tyler, over to you. You had an interesting day. You spent the day with our governor.
I spent last Saturday with John Bell Edwards. Yeah, I'm writing a magazine piece that hasn't yet appeared, but it was a day that we began in Baton Rouge, marking the 1-year anniversary of the historic flooding, speaking of flooding, in Baton Rouge a year ago. And then we flew in a helicopter to Lafayette, and he did an event there where there was also terrible flooding in that neighborhood as well. And so I got a chance to kind of find out what the governor's, how he's spending his time, what's on his mind. There's some of this has been made public. He's convening groups of businessmen to try to sell them on his plan for solving the fiscal deficit. The fiscal deficit is going to be caused by particularly the 1 cent sales tax, which is going to expire in mid-2018. And he and many other people are saying that you cannot simply cut your way to you have to make up some of that revenue by raising taxes, perhaps by renewing that penny. So that's one thing the governor is trying to do, is to build support for.
Because he hasn't had support for that in the legislature.
Well, he's
That's
had it
right.
in the Senate. He's had it among Democrats in the House, and he's had it among some Republicans, but not a majority of the Republicans in the House, and that's been the stumbling block. So he's trying to go around them by talking to business leaders and hoping that they will put pressure on these conservative Republicans to come together with a plan for him. This would all be taking place about June of next year. Another thing that the governor is doing, although he doesn't talk about it very much, is he's raising money. Particularly from now until December, he's got a number of fundraisers. We were talking earlier in the show about Michael Bagneris wanting money for the mayor's race. Well, the governor is trying to line up something like $9 or $10 million to have in hand for the 2019 re-election, because he knows the Republicans are coming after him. And one of the interesting questions that I was asking him was that there have been national Democrats who have been saying we cannot help a Democrat who runs for office if that Democrat is pro-life. This has particularly been pushed by people on the left of the Democratic Party, and also the pro-choice groups. John Bell Edwards is a pro-life Democrat. Right. And he said to me, because I asked him, well, what happens if people are not going to want to support you, the National Democrats, because they're going to say that you're pro-life, knowing that the National Republicans are going to come after you? And his answer to me was, well, if I don't get the help I need, I don't get reelected. And if I'm not in office, you don't have the Medicaid expansion, you don't have pushing for a higher minimum wage, you don't have a push for pay equity, which are, important issues for Democrats.
So it would seem that the Democratic Party would maybe think twice about that and stick with the Democratic governor.
His belief is by 2019, it's 2 years away, that the Democrats, national Democrats, will come to his aid again, because we can be sure that national Republicans will be trying to unseat him. Remember, he's the only Democrat elected to statewide office in Louisiana. He's the only Democratic governor in the Deep South, and in no state in the country that Donald Trump won did he get a higher percentage of the vote than in Louisiana.
Interesting. So how are people reacting to him?
His poll numbers are good. His approval rating is about 55 to 60%. Remember, he won the race against David Vitter 2 years ago with 56%. Remember the terrible shooting and the flooding in Baton Rouge a year ago? People, I think, thought that he handled that very well, was very commanding. And I think polls suggest that people think that he's trying to do the right thing, that he's very, very popular among African-American voters, which is the base of the Democratic Party in Louisiana. He's got about a 40% approval rating among Republicans and among whites. And that would be enough to get him reelected if the election were tomorrow.
I think whenever he can go about and be gubernatorial without having to worry about the legislature, he can really just excel and show himself. It's the legislature where the battering comes in.
And him talking about taxes.
Partisan,
him talking about taxes does not help him.
Okay, we'll be looking for that piece in Politico, right?
Yes.
Okay, thanks a lot, Tyler. Over to Errol now. Council at Large race in Orleans. What's it looking like?
Yeah, it's an interesting office. In 1954, when the current city charter was created, they created a 7-member council, which was 5 districts and 2 at large. The at large being sort of like, I guess, the equivalent of the Senate in Washington with the bigger perspective. And there have been 7 mayors since that charter was created. Of that, 3 of them came from the council at large position. The Morial is kind of into that tradition, but I think over time it's going to be more and more of a stepping stone for mayors. Vic Schiro was the first, and then Sidney Bartholomew and Moon Landrieu. There has been an unwritten understanding, and all it can be is an understanding. It could never be legalized, but that of the 2 at-large positions, and again, you can't talk politics without talking race, that of the 2 at-large positions, that 1 is a white seat and 1 is a black seat. And to the credit of black and white politicians in New Orleans, they've all pretty much honored that, at least since the 60s when the black vote became the majority vote. That has pretty much been what happened. There was one brief deviation after Katrina when the voting patterns changed, but it has pretty much been that pattern. And it's the pattern right now. Jason Williams holds 1 seat, and Stacey Head, who's decided not to run again, holds the other. And so if that tradition holds, then it bodes well. And another change is that these 2 seats used to be both elected at the same time. Everybody ran in the same pot, and it had this very complicated mathematical formula to determine the winner. Now they've divided into 2 districts, so Division 1 and Division 2. Division 1, which was, and they're both the same thing, they both represent the same citywide district, which is currently Stacey Head's district. Helena Moreno, who's a state representative, I think she's preserved as a front runner on this. If she winds up winning this election, then I think you can see a rising star in New Orleans politics. She's someone we're going to hear a lot more of. She's well known already. She had a TV career. She's done well as a legislator. She has an Hispanic following. She has a female following.
She has competition, too.
She does. That's the name, too. And so I think it's an important election in terms of see what happens to her. She does have competition, and it's a guy named Joseph Bowie. Well, actually, she has 2 opponents, but probably the major opponent is Joseph Bowie, who's a state representative and who's black. And so we just have to see how that race goes. The other race, Jason Williams, the incumbent, he has like 5 people running against him, but I don't see any sign of a major campaign. And so I would guess that Williams is going to win fairly easy, and Moreno is going to be the front runner there. But it's just a question of what kind of campaign Bowie puts together.
Okay, October 14th is the primary. Right. Okay. Tyler, you had an interesting weekend recently. You also went to the former Governor Edwards' birthday party.
Yeah, after hanging out with the governor, John Bel Edwards, I went to the 90th birthday party at the Renaissance Hotel in Baton Rouge for Edwin Edwards. And John Bel Edwards showed up. Some of us asked questions about whether it was the appropriate place for him to be for a man who is spent 8.5 years in prison, and he said he got a little testy with us, saying he was there to honor Edwin Edwards. But actually, John Bel Edwards gave a very, very funny speech. And of course, Edwin Edwards, 90 years old, still going strong. 500 people there. Each person gave $250. and he gave just a typically funny Edwin Edwards speech that just left everybody going, my God, this guy's 90 years old and he's still got it.
Yeah, he certainly does. So describe to us the atmosphere. What was that party like?
There was 50 different tables, and there was 10 people at a table. Again, everybody paid $250 for the opportunity, and that money will go to Edwin Edwards. I made a back-of-the-envelope calculation that he'll make about $75,000 from that night. And at the head table was Kathleen and Raymond Blanco, John Alario was a Republican State Senate President, Billy Nungesser, the Republican Lieutenant Governor, and Edwin Edwards and his wife Trina. And Chris Owens showed up to give him a plaque. And John Bel Edwards made a joke about how what a difficult position he was after Chris Owens gave a few words, then John Bel Edwards had to give a talk, but he was very funny. And then Edwin Edwards spoke for 25 minutes. And interestingly, was very touched by people that he'd known over the years, and if you want to be cynical, people that he helped make a lot of money for over the years, they were there. And one thing he said was, on the day that he turned 90 years old, remember he's married and he's got a young son. He said the day he turned 90 years old, he took his 4-year-old to pre-K.
That is.
That same night in New Orleans was the 90th birthday party for Tom Benson. And I heard, I didn't see, that Chris Owens actually made both of them. That she went to the Benson party early and then kind of rushed over to Baton Rouge and made it in time. So
she's a pretty amazing woman, still going strong, isn't
That's
she?
right. At age 90, former Governor Edwards, happy birthday to him, and of course to Tom Benson as well. Well, did the former governor have a good time? Did it look like he enjoyed his 90th bash?
He really did, and he got a little. I've known him over the years, and there's a bit of distance he keeps from people, but I saw him get emotional at the end of his talk in a way that you don't normally see from him. He was really touched by all those people who were there.
Okay, Tyler, thanks. All right, time to look ahead.
actually, we're going to look back one night.
Okay.
Last night there was something special. This Gold Medal Chef's Gala, which is put on by the Louisiana Hospitality Association. Toward the end, they ask everybody to be quiet, and they say, we have a special phone call right now. I want everybody to hear this. And they called the number. It was Steve Scalise.
Oh.
And Steve Scalise is the one. He was bubbling with enthusiasm, very, very excited, and appreciated being heard. And of course, the crowd gave him a big ovation. And apparently, some people in the Chefs Association sent him some food because he's quick to point out how great the food is compared to what he's been eating in the hospital. but he sounded good. He didn't say anything about coming back. He did mention, the therapy continues.
Yeah, well, best to him. Tyler.
Yeah, if it's okay to mention a big article that I've got coming out in the Advocate about a man named Shane Guidry, who is a very successful businessman with Harvey Gulf. But what really has put him in the news and why we want to write about it at the Advocate is that he's probably become the single biggest Republican donor in the state, and he's mixed up in some business deals that involve some very powerful politicians as well.
This weekend?
Yes.
Okay. Dawn.
I predict we'll be sitting here next week talking about the Saints' first preseason win since 2014. I think it's finally coming.
I like what she's saying. I think that when we touched on it earlier, you're going to see this recent flooding really factor into the campaign for mayor and the council seats as well. You're starting to see the ads now. Everybody says crime is going to be the issue, and it probably still will be, but I think this could rival it.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot for being here. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
The firm of Bowen, McLeod & Britt helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service.